Hello everyone, so today I'm going to talk about a concept that not a lot of people probably know about unless you're in tech. So as you could probably tell from the title of this video, it's actually going to be about RSUs, or in general like stocks at a startup slash tech company. Honestly, I think I have seen these in like other companies, but this is primarily in tech, and being in tech, I'm gonna just talk about it in the world of tech specifically. However, a lot of this could be transferable to other industries. I just haven't really spoken to them about that specifically. This actually came as a result of this comment over here. I was kind of curious about it, and to be honest, it's hard to do a video, but I did want to make a video just in case you were wondering about this as well. If you were new to tech or you just didn't know what an RSU was, like let's say you're like not even new to tech, maybe you're trying to get into tech and then you're like, what is compensation when it comes to RSUs? Then this would probably help you a little bit as to how to kind of evaluate your RSUs, because even though you have that in your compensation package, personally for me, the way you would see it could be a different amount depending on how you see it, if that makes sense. So the first thing I want to talk about is I will be focusing primarily on RSUs. I have received options as a compensation package, but I'm not going to talk about it that much because I haven't actually accepted a job that had options. So I don't really have that much when it comes to the practical knowledge of that. I do have friends that have options, but they honestly have not had a positive experience with this. So I'll kind of include at the very end for a little snippet based off of my friends' experiences, but for the most part, I will be relying on RSUs specifically. So first off, what is an RSUs? It's called a restricted stock units, and it's actually like stocks that you see that are specifically allocated for employees. This is where it gets a little bit confusing because at first you're like, so we don't get the stock that we see in the stock market? Yes and no. You do get it, but it's usually like a specific class of those stocks. So like whatever you have is not publicly traded. It's different. I can only speak personally from my experience at Google, but what we have seen is that the tech company actually has some kind of brokerage you can either choose, or maybe there's only one option that you have. At Google, we had two options. You choose one, and then that's actually where your stock grant sits. The way it looks like is actually different than normal stocks too. So this is like, it gets a little, I don't want to show my screen because again, it gets a little bit too private there. But essentially you can see what you're granted and then you can see what's been vested. For RSUs, even though like, let's give a number of like, let's say your compensation package has $100,000 of RSUs. It's a little bit tricky because you're not actually going to get $100,000. On a perfect market, you're going to get $100,000, maybe even more. But the way that it works is that you are granted $100,000 in RSUs, but you're not granted in the number of RSUs, if that makes sense. So what this means is that at the time it's been granted, that amount, and then you break it up to how many stocks you get, that's the number that you get instead. So essentially you're granted the number of stocks based off of the amount, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. And then after that, what you get is when it's vested, you get those number of stocks, but you get at the value it's been vested at. So you actually would get over time potentially stocks at different costs or different prices. So even though it says 100,000 in your compensation package, you'll realistically won't get 100,000. However, this is usually like if the economy is declining, if the economy is doing really well, you actually could get higher than 100,000. In this case, when it comes to RSUs, I'm going to explain. Honestly, there's other videos out there when it comes to talking about like the actual technicalities of RSUs. I'm just going to talk about more like the investment strategies of RSUs and what I've seen other people do. But to make it really quickly, there's tech companies and startups that have like a cliff, 1 year cliff. And that just means that it doesn't vest until 1 year in. Vesting is like it's not a new concept. It's something that is mostly talked about when it comes to something like this, where it's like you get a grant, but then it's like actualized, like you actually get the stocks at the time it's been vested. You mostly see vested when it comes to like 401k matches And I actually see that mostly when it comes to that, I think like across many companies, not just in tech. So vested just means that like it's actually yours as opposed to like being granted yours. And 1 year cliff just means that you have to wait 1 year before it actually becomes yours. Some companies, however, have like 0 year cliff, or maybe not 0 year cliff, but more like maybe you get it vested quarterly, maybe monthly. Even when in the same company, you can have a different vesting schedule. You'll have to double check when you get your compensation package or your offer letter. And you can also, honestly, I would recommend talking to your peers around you, either in your team or like people in tech as well, because this can vary like so much. Even within the same team, it varies. Like I've actually like spoke to my coworker, and apparently we have different vesting schedules, which was like, we have the same level, same role, same team. How is this possible? But it is possible. So that's the cliff. And then there's also the vesting schedule and the percentages of it, which means I think like the most standard one is like 25, 25, 25, 25, which means you get 25% of those stocks from that amount in that exact year. And when we say that, it's like in 1 year it vests. But again, like I said, you can actually have it where it's actually going to be like, okay, let's say the 25%, you get $25,000 of stocks, but not really. You don't get 25,000. You get the stocks of value of 25,000 at the time it's been granted. So it could actually be like, I don't know, let's make it 10,000. $10,000 of value at the time that it's actually been vested, which means that you get $10,000 of stocks of the same number of stocks from when it was granted. It's the same number, it's just the value has gone down. So from there, what ends up happening is that you either, if you have it 1 year, you get all of those in 1 year. But if like, let's say you get it quarterly, you can have $2,500 in stocks in like the actual vested value in each of those quarters. If like, that's just an example, okay? But when it comes to actually what happens when it vests, these are like the 3 ways I've seen people that I know do this. One is you hold it. Holding it means that you actually hold it, you don't sell it, you're not buying, you can't buy actually. That like what you're buying is a publicly traded stock. These are RSUs, these are restricted, they're literally called restricted. It's a completely different class of its own. So in this kind of way, you kind of have to hold it. What happens is that you actually don't see any value in this. The way I see it is when I approached Google compensation package, I completely zeroed out. Like I focus on the base salary and the bonus because I put 0 value to the stocks just because of how volatile it can get. I mean, like this economy, it's very volatile. So that's why I personally put a 0 value to RSUs. I'm not expecting a value out of them. If I get good positive value, that's great. And like, not to mention, even though it's not like the full 100,000, maybe it ends up dropping to like, I don't know, 75,000 value of some sort, then I still see 75,000 in value. Not that I lost 25,000. I may have lost 25,000 in like potential revenue through this, but for the most part, I still considered like my base as 0 because I don't see value in them since I'm not selling them immediately. I am a holder. I hold it until I really, really think I need to cash it. So not like in this case, if you were to sell it, let's say in 10 years or so, if like all of a sudden you're like, okay, maybe I want to go buy a yacht or buy a cat cafe, which is actually probably the most realistic one, then you actually pay taxes on the gains. Okay, so this means that let's say the 100,000 in stocks that I get, these 100,000, maybe it has become 200,000. I only pay taxes on income taxes. I only pay income tax on that 100,000. However, when like the part that I was trying to figure out the most is like, did I pay tax on that initial 100,000 then? But in this case, like for us at Google, we actually have it where they took stocks away as tax. They like withheld it. So if I were to sell it, I don't have additional tax. It's already been deducted already at the time that it's been vested. It's like the growth. That's what I would be like actually paying taxes on. At this point, it's going to become like basically a normal stock because you get like, regardless if it's like an RSU or not, you pay tax on your gains or your losses. You actually don't pay tax on your losses, but you pay taxes on your gains. So that's one method. The other method is that immediately after invest, you sell. You actually pay 0 additional taxes on the gains because you have no gains. It's like 0. This only works if it's on the same day. I don't think I've heard of people that do this when it's like on the day 2 because it could be risky. You know, you never know how volatile these taxes are. You do it on the day it invests, and usually they tell you like, hey, you're in your email like, hey, your stocks have been invested, or like, you know, the date based off the schedule that you have. So you're gonna have to really track that. Those are the main 2 that I know. And usually, and this is actually like what we had like a personal finance planner come in and talk about this at one point about like, so when should I sell? And this is the part that I'm trying to figure out myself, but this is the part that you need to kind of think about your overall portfolio. Before, I had Accenture stocks. Like, I don't really play in the stocks. I mostly play in index funds, and that's usually in my retirement. I don't really touch stocks beyond that. I have like my Robinhood account, which is like my fun money kind of thing. For my stocks, I had primarily Accenture stocks because it was like from the stock program where we get like a 10% discount essentially. And I had the Google stocks. In this case, it was almost 100% tech. I mean, I guess like Accenture, I would lump it up with tech, not exactly in consulting. I don't even know what category they would fall in, but Accenture is a public company compared to a lot of the consulting firms out there. So in this case, it was not diversified at all. And that personal finance planner that came in and talked to us about it said, at a certain point, you might want to sell those, in this case, like RSUs, to buy in a different area so you can diversify. That's like one reason. Mine is really just going to be more on like, oh, I don't need the money, so I'm not going to. But at a certain point, you have to kind of evaluate your portfolio and see, should you sell to be able to buy a different type of stock, or even go into index funds if that's what you want. So that's what you could do. I'm still in that stage of figuring that out. I honestly am just gonna wait until my stocks go higher than the initial amount that I was granted. So I'm in no rush. I don't need the money. So I'm only relying on my base salary and my bonuses and my side hustle. So in this case, that's all. I wanted to talk about this because of this comment, and I know that there's other people that are new to tech or new to this world, or even just new to like a job that has RSUs. There might be other jobs, like I said, that have RSUs. For options, I also personally put a value of 0 on them. And then I think most people actually put a value of 0 because options actually I'm not going to give you the full definition, but it's essentially you have the right to buy a stock at a strike price. And they generally come in handy when it comes to a non-public company. So it's either 2 ways. I think these are the most ways that people are usually considering options. Either the startup gets bought out, then that way, like, whatever value they basically spend by, then they basically can get their share of that amount. So that's one. Like the most common one I've seen is that actually, like, the workday practice that I was in at Accenture was a startup. It's not a startup. It was like a small consulting firm that has options. Then they basically got a stock payout. That's what the options were also for. Even though they didn't sell their options, you can sell your options too. That's not as often that happens. But like basically what happened was you could get bought out by the buying company. The other one is that you just eventually, the actual company, the startup IPOs, they get an IPO. Then that option becomes very powerful. So those are like the most ways I've seen with options. Again, the actual success of a startup is going to be very low unless you know that they're going to IPO or you think that they will be that they'll do an IPO. You do keep the options even by the time it vests and everything after you leave the company. You can do the same thing for RSUs. You keep them regardless. They're basically part of your compensation. It's not like they're tying it to your job, regardless if you have it or not. The only part that you'll lose is the unvested part. So technically, you could leave a company and you'll still have those options, and you can sell or you can purchase in this kind of way. So that's like what happens is that for options, personally, I can't speak too much about it, but for RSUs, those are like the most ways I've heard of people invest their RSUs is that they hold until they want to spend money in some kind of way, then you sell, or that they sell immediately on the day that it vests to avoid those taxes, and they treat it almost like a bonus. And then third, you sell when you want to diversify. Those are probably the three main ways. Or I think like I only mostly hear about the two, but the third is something that like people might do as a result of holding. So hopefully that helps. Let me know if you have any questions down below. I am not a financial advisor. I'm not someone that is an expert in this. I'm only just sharing this, like all of these anecdotes and experiences that a lot of my friends in tech and in startups have. But I just wanted to kind of share just because I knew that I was in, if you're wondering about what an RSU, an option, or you're interested in tech, or you just want to understand this a little bit more, I was in your place as well. And I wanted to know, okay, yeah, I know like the concepts of RSUs or options, but what do people do with it? That was the part I was kind of curious about, because that can help you evaluate a compensation package. For me, like for example, options, I always assume it's zero. I'm a really risk averse person, so I'm going to see any kind of risk as zero. If it works out, it works out perfect. But I would see options as zero, and I also see RSUs as zero, but I will always try to get RSUs as high as I could possibly as second place, and then base salary as the first place. So if that's what you're trying to consider when it comes to salary negotiation, that's what you should do. However, the only thing where I would be a little bit more curious about is if you know for sure an IPO is coming, that's when you may want to pay attention a little bit more, just because whatever amount you might get might actually go exponentially high. All right, so that's all. Let me know down below in your comments of what you think, and if you have any questions. I will share what I could share. I don't know that much about this area, to be honest. I just wanted to answer that question, and I did want to talk about this in case you had the same question too. All right, thank you. Bye.